Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 25th of July, 2022, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. Your host today, Mike Robinson, myself, Brian Gerrish. We're delighted to be joined by Vanessa Beeley and David Scott, bringing us Northern Exposure from north of the border.
Okay, let's get straight on with the Tory leadership and Liz Truss, because it looks like she's likely to win, increasingly so. Everybody seems to want her to be Prime Minister for some reason. I don't really understand it, but there you go. The Telegraph headline, Liz Truss, I'm the insurgent candidate in the Tory leadership campaign.
And she's wearing purple, the colour of kings, so
Yeah.
she's there as the top runner, obviously.
So she's bound to win. She is positioning herself, to many, as being a hawkish, a warmonger, effectively. She's criticising Rishi Sunak as being a dove. We'll come on to that in a second, but I just wanted to pick the quote out of this. If we just put it back on screen for a second. Here it is. She says, I see myself as an insurgent because I want to change things, she said. And the article says it's an eye-catching word choice. So is Mr. Sunak the establishment candidate? And so it goes on. We'll get some comment from Vanessa and David in a second, but Nadine Dorries then rode to Liz's defence if she needs it, or support, let's say. Liz Truss will be travelling the country wearing her earrings, which cost circa £4.50 from Claire Accessories. Meanwhile, Rishi visits Teesside in Prada shoes worth 450 quid and sported £3,500 worth of bespoke suit as he prepared for Crunch leadership vote. So we can see the quality of the debate continues to increase on a daily basis. And getting back to the Telegraph here, this was the headline: Liz Truss to accuse Rishi Sunak of being soft on Russia and China. So she, as we suggested on Friday's programme, positioning herself to be the war president, if you want to call it that. But Guido Fawkes very upset about her taking this position or criticism of Rishi. Guido Fawkes saying on Twitter, I'm confident that neither Truss nor Sunak will be soft on China or Russia. It's not a charge senior ministers of the government of a nation that is a permanent member of the UN Security Council should be throwing around lightly. Our allies and our enemies are watching, says Guido Fawkes. So David, come to you first. What are your thoughts on this pantomime?
Well, it's very strange because most of Liz Truss's comments are sort of closely arrayed cliches, right? So that's how she's operating. It's all very surface. There was references being made to sort of Maybot Mark II during the debates, and that's pretty much how she was coming across. There may be more to her, but it wasn't certainly showing there. And then we've got this strange insurgent. Insurgent's a strange line. I mean, what does Westminster need? Insurgent? Maybe detergent is more what it needs these days. She's talking about a bonfire of the Quangos. I think we've heard that one before, and it didn't happen. So she's trying to portray herself as the next Thatcher. Thatcher had her Falklands. Liz has already got a war already ongoing, and she's been involved, so she's got that side to show herself as the leader of the nation. And then there'll be, if it's like Thatcher, lots of talk about a smaller state as the state gets larger. Is that what we're looking at? No change? I suspect it is.
I think that's absolutely right. Vanessa, let's bring you on now, because I found the use of the term insurgent quite offensive, actually. Now, you're in Syria, where there is a continuing insurgency, as we're about to see in 1 second. The prospective Prime Minister shouldn't be using words like this.
No, it's disgusting. I mean, Britain has been responsible for funding terrorism inside Syria and terrorist auxiliaries in the shape of the White Helmets and various other organizations linked to them for the last 11 years. So for her to call herself an insurgent is an insult to the damage that the UK has done to the Syrian people, not least of all yesterday, which we'll talk about shortly. But I have to say also, she's looking very Clinton-esque in the purple dress with the new haircut. But she certainly doesn't have anywhere near the brains of Clinton or of Thatcher, for that matter. So, I mean, it's a terrifying prospect.
Yes, indeed it is. Okay, well, let's come on to events yesterday in Syria. We've got a little bit of video here. Can you just give us a brief introduction to this?
Yeah, well, I mean, basically, after the Tehran summit, the trilateral meeting between Putin, Erdogan, and Raisi, the terrorists, almost 2 days after, declared a new campaign against the Syrian government to remove the Syrian government. And this weekend, in the Syrian Christian, Orthodox Christian, important to say that because of the link to Russia, they had planned the opening ceremony for the replica church of Hagia Sophia. Of course, in 2020, July 2020, Erdogan requisitioned what was effectively a church and a museum full of Christian icons. He requisitioned it as a mosque in an attempt to win over the favor of his Muslim Brotherhood voters in Turkey, and he effectively mothballed most of the Christian relics in the church and turned it into an acting mosque. So in response to that, the Syrian Christians in Skerbiya in 2020 started to build a replica Hagia Sophia, not only as a response to Erdogan and his attempts to basically wipe Christianity from the Middle East, a la Ottoman Empire, but also to provide a place of worship for the civilians in the town, and also in honor of the martyrs, both Russian and Syrian, and of course various other allies in Syria. So this was effectively a ceremony to bless the church by a huge number of faith leaders, both from Muslim communities, both Shia and Sunni, Christian communities, Catholic and Orthodox. You know, this is Syria. This is the bringing together of all sects and religions in coexistence. So they all came for the ceremony. More than 1,000 people were present on this particular day. And of course, Sunday is the day of worship for the Christians in Syria. And this was the consecration of holy ground. And this is what happened when the Turkish-backed terrorists decided that they do not comply with any kind of religious freedom. And of course, in response to, as I said, the pressure from Iran and Russia for Syria, to the Syrian government to take back control of territory and the Syrian Arab Army to be allowed into that territory. This was part of their campaign. So the first video shows it was a suicide drone, so a drone packed with explosives, and it targeted the ceremony, as you'll see in the video. The video it's not me filming. I'm actually about 4 meters to the right of the explosion itself, and I'll explain how we were saved from the blast. So the next video is just a compilation of photographs and video from the event. You'll see again here the attack. As I said, this was a suicide drone, so it's a drone that's packed with explosives that can zero in even on mobile GPS, so it can be used to assassinate individuals. This was unfortunately the site of the murder of a Syrian Arab Army soldier who, with his body, actually shielded us from the blast. The statue and the soldier, Hisham Elias, who was killed, I saw his body being taken away from the site. He and the statue shielded us. Where you see the statue, we were sitting directly behind it. So this statue, which is in honor of the martyrs in Syria, you can see here all of the chairs scattered. There were more than 1,000 people, the majority of whom were civilians, children, teenagers from the local choir, the local band, and they had packed the kind of ready-made auditorium and lined the streets. There were 2 drones that actually fell on this day, one that you saw, and another, thank God, didn't explode, but it fell behind the buildings in the area where the cars had been parked. 1 soldier was injured there, 7 more were injured in this explosion. And 1 soldier, as they took the force of the blast, he's on the right of the statue there, Hisham Elias really a hero because, these are also two of the children that were injured in the blast, not seriously, thank God, and they've now been allowed out. The statue, what it says on there is a Syrian Arab Army inscription, homeland, honor, and sincerity. And I really have to say that that statue on this day saved our lives, that and Hisham Elias, because as I say, they took the force of the blast. If the missile had landed 2 meters further in, it would have been a massacre. I was sitting next to the ambassador of Hungary, the ambassadors of Abkhazia. There were also the ambassador of Russia. There were a number who was speaking when the explosion happened was one of the sheikhs from Al-Khawf, the religious institution in Syria, so Sunni Muslim, who had come to share in the consecration of the church. But there were a huge number of faith leaders, diplomats, parliamentarians, high level and influential people, not only military. The military were a minority and they weren't there in anger, so to speak. They were there to share in this honoring of the martyrs from all the allies that have fought against terrorism inside Syria. And this is what the terrorists did on a Sunday. And we have to assume that it's Turkey giving them the technology to manufacture these drones. We saw in one of the last programs Russia targeting, if you remember, the underground drone factory belonging to Jolani, to the HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham or Al-Qaeda. So it is without doubt Turkey that is giving them the technology. It could also be NATO experts that are enabling them or helping them on the ground to build these weapons. So it's a whole new form of warfare starting inside Syria. And now the defenses in both towns are going to have to be reinforced to deal with it.
Oh, okay, well, thank you very much for that report, Vanessa. Just very quickly, I haven't seen any report on this in the Western press. And
No.
you got to ask, where's the moral outrage?
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is that the terrorists immediately put out a bulletin saying it was the Syrian Arab Army. Oh no, then it was the Iranians that are targeting their own people in order to start a war with the terrorists. I don't know if, I'm pretty certain, at least in Sweden, that mainstream picked up this story and ran with it. So if we see anything, it will be the version that the terrorists want the Western media to publish, not what really happened.
Yes.
Vanessa, if I can just add, as you were talking, and how horrific that incident was, but of course, ultimately, it's one of very many that's taken place in Syria. What came into my mind, it was the fact that the BBC's own charity, BBC Media Action, was operating in Syria all those years ago, openly boasting that they were helping to foment unrest within Syria. And of course, look what's unfolded. And at the same time, we've got the same charity, BBC Media Action, working in exactly the same way in Ukraine. So are we going to see honest reports from the BBC? Well, we can't, because of course they would be revealing what their own dirty hand has been doing. It's obscene, really.
Yes.